What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for game week 34. So I'm going to show you how the team is looking for the double game week, talk through my transfers where I'm probably going to take at least a -4, possibly even a -8 as well. And we're also going to discuss captaincy, which I know looks very obvious on paper. And to be fair, it really is. But I think there's a few things to talk about anyway, and I'll come on to them later on. Before all that, let's quickly go through how I did in game week 33. So it was another pretty good week, 77 points, which gave me another green arrow. I didn't make any transfers, so I've rolled that into game week 34. So another green arrow, that's now 10 in a row, and I've absolutely had a good bit of luck over that run, but I'm taking it given how the season was going before that. So I've already showed you this before, but I was 677k in game week 23. Now I'm 42k. So I've gone up just under 10,000 places this week, and I think some of my kind of better decisions recently are, one, not rushing for price changes, because I did get priced out of the moves that I want to make in game week 34, which I'll talk about later, but I wasn't completely sure in 33 which way to go, and because Fernandes was a doubt, he would probably have been the one that would have had to have been sold, but I didn't really want to do that, and I didn't want price changes to affect that decision, so I think that has gone well. Also with a little bit of luck, don't get me wrong, Kane not getting any goals, but getting 2 assists and 3 bonus, that's probably not going to happen that often, but still I think it was an overall good decision. And the other one is just not selling Man United players recently when they've been a doubt, so not getting rid of Rashford in game week 31, and not getting rid of Fernandes this week, and ultimately the reason for that was, I knew I would want them in 34 if they were fit, and so I had to just roll with it. And I actually think this is something to think about moving forwards. Maybe not for this season, but for next season. When we think of the bench, we always kind of think about how often we're going to use that player, right? So last week we were talking about Solanke, and that if you get him in for 33 or 34, you're probably only going to play him once or twice, and then he's just going to rot on your bench. But what a good bench player enables you to do is not have to rush decisions you maybe don't want to. So back in game week 31, and I'm not saying Rashford to Grealish was a bad move, it absolutely wasn't, but because I had March on the bench, where usually I would have just not had him, right? I wouldn't have played him, I would have just left him there. It meant I didn't have to rush that decision because I could play him instead. Similarly, this week, I didn't really have to rush Fernandes out because Odegaard could come on instead. Now, it so happens that Odegaard only got 2 points, so he wouldn't have done anything for me anyway, but it still gave me that option. So I think moving forward, I am probably going to tank one of the positions on the bench to enable those funds elsewhere, but I don't think we should completely disregard how useful a bench can be. Not necessarily in terms of rotation, well, I'll use them for this fixture, then bench them, then use them again, but how it doesn't make us sometimes rush transfers that maybe we don't want to do. But I will say, there's obviously a bit of luck involved as well. Also, though, on the flip side, how did Fernandes not score last night? He hit the bar from pretty close range. I don't know how it didn't go in. And I know he's got the assist, right? So I'm not trying to get too greedy. But how that guy has not got more returns over the last kind of 3 to 4 games, I do not know. But still, an assist, decent. Rashford coming away with 12 points, very decent. The only bad thing last night was the result. Man United really let Spurs back in, and they played well, and Kane deserved the 2 assists. He was one of the best players on the pitch. Haaland, 14 points against Arsenal. I mean, it's just what he does. It's very boring, but it's just too difficult to go against him, which is one of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute. And then Solly March chipped in with an assist. And I've got to be honest, before last night's games, I thought this was the run of green arrows over. But Rashford, Fernandes and Kane really chipped in. So, like I said, a little bit of luck. Some good decisions with some very good outcomes. Things are going well. And going into a double game week, you really hope to not get a red arrow. Maybe this will be the week. Let's see. All right, let's take a look at the defensive options. And the reason that Chilwell is in the starting 11 and not any of Watkins, Botman or Kane is just due to the transfers that I'm intending to make. So I thought it would be easier to visualise if I set the team and formation up in terms of how it's probably going to look by the time we get to the game week 34 deadline. And Harry Kane on the bench, obviously if I was making no moves, I would play him ahead of Chilwell, but I'm intending to do Kane to Greenwood to enable a lot of money to be spent elsewhere. And I'll talk about those transfers transfers as we go through the video. In terms of the other defensive players, there's not really too much to talk about with Ederson, Shaw, Trippier and Estepinian. I know that Ederson has been a little bit of a joke, and I've had him twice already this season. It hasn't gone well. I bought him in game week 31. I didn't really want to do that, but I had to set up for the doubles later on. So I think if he's going to get me something, this is now when I would hope it would be. Game weeks 34 all the way to 38. He's got 2 double game weeks in that time. And I was looking at the amount of clean sheets Man City have had. In the last 12 games, they've had only 3 clean sheets. And in every other game, they've conceded just 1 goal. So they're not too far off, just conceding 0 goals instead. And I'm hoping this is going to be the run of clean sheets. No doubt against Fulham and West Ham, they'll just concede 2 goals in both games now. But I think it doesn't matter, right? There's no decision to be made this week. Ederson with a double is much better than Kepa away to Arsenal. So that's easy. And I think with Estepinian and Shaw, Brighton not really keeping a huge amount of clean sheets. Estepinian not really getting attacking returns. Similarly, obviously, Luke Shaw's gone from left back to left centre back. He is still on a few set pieces, but ultimately his attacking potential is less. Varane and Martinez are not in the team either, so the Man United defence is a bit weaker. But there's just no need to be worrying about players like that at this point in time. They've got a double game week. They're very likely to play both games. They are not where my priorities lie in terms of transfers. And then with Trippier, I do like having, you know, full 11 of double game week players if I can. I just don't think there's enough transfers to go around to kind of worry about him. So I'm likely to have 10 double game week players and only 1 single game week player. And if that's Trippier against Southampton, I'm kind of okay with that. It's worth saying that Trippier's been pretty rubbish, right? If you look at the last 12 games, like all the way back to, I think it's this West Ham game, he got 1 assist against Wolves, but they conceded, so he only got 5 points. Against Man United, he got the 12-pointer. Outside of that, he's blanked every single time. But if you're going to start another run of points, Southampton at home is probably a good time to get it. And it's worth kind of saying, Newcastle playing very, very well right now. If anything, he's probably been a little bit unlucky not to get more returns now. And earlier on in the season, he was probably lucky to get the amount of returns he did. Remember, there was a few times where he came off early, then they conceded. So I think he got lucky then, and now he's probably being a little bit unlucky. So at some point, hopefully that will change. Could be Southampton at home. In terms of transfers, with the money I have available for this defender slot, because I do want to bring Salah in, I can't quite get to Trent Alexander-Arnold. I only have 7.3 million to spend, and he is 7.5 million. Now, the alternatives, in my view, are just not as good or anywhere near as good as Trent. Robertson's probably the next best thing, and I like the fact that Liverpool have got 2 home games this week, but from an attacking perspective, he's not as good as Trent. I do have some slight worries that Robertson is more susceptible to being, you know, rotated with Tsimikas than maybe Trent is, especially when he's playing in midfield. There's no other, like, Milner's not going to come and play right back and then invert and play in the same way as Trent. So I'm not really worried about that. I don't think Robertson's going to get rotated, but he's still not as attacking. Then you've got Van Dijk, or you go to a Man City defender instead. But I think at some point, well, all those Man City players might miss at least 1 game. And just Diaz instead of Trent just doesn't sound great. So I think right now, I'm probably taking a -4 total and getting Robertson. But I do have the option of taking an additional hit to afford Trent. And Trent in this week was always my original plan. Back in game week 26, my moves were going to be 3 for a -4, including getting Trent. I've just been priced out of that. I still don't regret not making early moves for price changes. I think it was the correct call. But what I could do is, Watkins, who's going to be on my bench, my original plan was to bench him this week, play him in 35, and then sell him in game week 36 for Isak. I could bring that Isak move forward and just get him this week instead for an additional hit. But the problem is, I'm then probably benching Isak to play Trippier instead. I mean, I could play Isak. He just got benched against Everton, so he's very likely to start against Southampton. But that means I'm benching Trippier. And I know he's been poor recently, but that is a great fixture for him. So it's an additional hit just to get the funds to afford Trent, bringing in a player that I don't need to bring in right now, that doesn't really benefit me much this week. So that's why I'm a little bit torn about it. For what it's worth, I think I'm going to end up taking the -8 to get Trent, because I just really want him in my team. And I suspect when I do that, I'll probably play Isak and bench Trippier, and that could go absolutely wrong. But that is a move that I'm considering doing. The only thing is, do I think that if I'm taking a -4 anyway to get Robertson, is Trent worth an additional 4 points? Probably. But you can also reframe that and say, is Trent this week worth 8 points more than Botman? If Newcastle get a clean sheet, which is quite likely against Southampton, I would say, Botman gets 6 points. Let's say he gets no attacking returns, no bonus. All of a sudden, Trent's got to get 14 points just to break even in a team that aren't keeping many clean sheets. So I still think I'm going to do it because I would rather take the kind of, hopeful luck and variance in a double game week, right? That Botman concedes and then Trent gets some attacking returns and it all works out. But I don't think it's as clear cut as it sounds. But I think with only 5 weeks to go and the fixtures that Liverpool have got on the double this week, 2 home games as well. I know Spurs at home is not going to be easy, but it's still 2 games at Anfield. I think I'm probably going to take the risk to do that. But if it doesn't work out, I don't think I can be that surprised because part of me is thinking it's not a great move. So that's likely what's going to happen. Kane to Greenwood, Watkins to Isak, and Chilwell to Trent. And obviously there'll be a midfield move later on that we'll talk about as well. So surprise, surprise, Salah's got a double game week and I want to bring him back into my side. And that is absolutely what's going to happen. I've already mentioned doing Kane to Greenwood, who's only 4 million. So that unlocks a lot of money to be spent elsewhere. And of course, having a good bench is important. And if you can have 3 playing players, happy days. But for the last 5 game weeks of the season, I think having Greenwood on the bench with Watkins and Botman there just in case, I think is perfectly fine. And the obvious move is to do Odegaard to Salah. And I don't think there can really be any arguments against that. There were a few tweets that came in after last night's matches saying, how can we sell Harry Kane? I think this is where it's important to have a bit of a rough plan of what moves you're going to want to make and try not to let form dictate your decisions too much. I'm not saying you should never take form into account, but I do think it clouds people's judgments when making moves sometimes. So if we think about the narratives for Harry Kane, for some of us, we haven't owned him for most of the season, and given his scores, right, which have been pretty consistent, that's been a bad move. So we get him in on the wild card in game week 26, because remember that all of a sudden Spurs had a game in 28, which we didn't think they were originally going to have. He gets 13 points against Forest. Happy days, super consistent, doesn't blank for the next 3, 6, 7 and 9. Most people are still pretty happy with him at this point, but then people start thinking about Salah and the narrative changes. So he blanks against Bournemouth. Well, that's not great. If he can't score against Bournemouth, maybe we get rid of him. Spurs get smashed by Newcastle. Wasn't a great performance. All of a sudden, Spurs are awful, which, to be fair, sometimes this season they have been. But he still scores. But then it's like, yeah, but it's only 6 points. He doesn't get double-digit hauls that are often. It hasn't happened since Forest in game week 27. And now he's got 11 points against Man United. The narrative has shifted back to, well, how can we get rid of him? Because he's only blanked once in the last 7 games. Ultimately, I think Kane is a great option for the rest of the season in isolation because Liverpool away, not keeping many clean sheets, and it's Palace, Villa, Brentford and Leeds on the last day of the season, which could be a big score. But who do I think is going to score more points, Kane or Salah? Salah. What was my original plan? Kane or Salah in game week 34? Salah. So what have I seen that should now change that opinion? Not a great deal. So that is going to be the move that I make, unless there's injury doubts or something in the press conference. Just on the Salah versus De Bruyne debate, I am recording this before Pep Guardiola's press conference ahead of this weekend. So I don't know if De Bruyne is going to be available. But even if he is, there's just not really any contest for me. I think Salah is the better option. And you can look to go different, and maybe that is one route to do it. But I don't feel like that is my move to go against the crowd. I just think that Salah is too good, especially with 2 home fixtures. That just kind of locks in that move for me. I know some people are thinking about, instead of going Kane right down to a cheap player like Greenwood, possibly getting Jota, maybe even foregoing Salah, but for me that is just not an option. I would just rather have Salah, who's nailed for minutes, etc, etc. In terms of the rest of the midfielders, it's a bit like the defenders. There's just no need to use any transfers on them, even if Matoma hasn't got many returns recently, which he has been a bit unlucky, by the way. You know, March just an assist last week, etc. I'm not going to use transfers to start moving these Brighton players around. I'm kind of locked in with them, and unless I get to like game weeks 35, 36, 37, etc, with no other moves to do, they're just going to stay in my side. And I always wanted both the Man United players for this double, and nothing's really changed there. They're both fit. They're both going to start each of those games, so I don't really see an issue. And also, we saw what happened last night when Eriksen goes off the pitch and Man United start making substitutions. They've got a tendency to not do quite as well, and that's exactly what happened last night. So Casemiro, Eriksen and Fernandes is going to start a lot. over the last kind of 7 games I think they've got left, which means Fernandes is going to play as number 10. He's completely different. And I don't really care that he's blanked a lot over recent games. I can't change that. My only decision now is, do I still think he's a good option going forward? And the answer to that question is yes. And I think the only real alternative, if we imagine that Odegaard is Salah, is to get a Man City midfielder. And I just don't think any of them are necessarily better than Fernandes. Even De Bruyne, right? If I had a choice between the two and there was nothing else to consider and De Bruyne was going to start every game, of course, I would probably pick De Bruyne over Fernandes. But when Fernandes has got penalties and guaranteed minutes, I think it's probably a lot closer than most people think. So I'm sure I'll come to regret that. I'm sure De Bruyne will outscore Fernandes, but there's a big price difference, right? We're really looking at Fernandes versus Grealish, etc., which again, there is a big price difference the other way, but I don't need that money for any other moves, apart from maybe getting Trent, but I've got that Watkins to Isak move as well if I want to. So I'm pretty happy with the midfield and how the team looks in general. Kane to Greenwood, Salah in for Odegaard, it's definitely happening. And then up front, it's just Haaland on his own. I've already mentioned that I'm going to sell Harry Kane. Then with Watkins, it's either move him to Isak to enable Trent, or I'm just going to bench him in favour of playing Trippier instead. So the team would look something like this with my -4. Kane, Odegaard, Chilwell out. Greenwood, Salah, Robertson in. I think the team looks pretty good. 4-5-1 formation, 10 double game week players. And Trippier the only one with a single game week. And I don't mind playing him against Southampton at home whatsoever. So it looks all right. The only thing that's playing on my mind is, a week or two ago, I was able to afford Trent instead of Robertson. And Trent is the one I really want, but I've been priced out. Now, I don't think it was a mistake to ignore the price changes. But the reality is, unless I take a -8, I cannot get Trent. Now, Robertson's a perfectly fine pick this week. I don't see a huge amount of rotation with Tsimikas. There's only 6 games left. They're still fighting for top 4. Very unlikely. I don't think it's going to happen, but that might be playing on Klopp's mind. And also, when Trent plays in midfield and Liverpool form a back 3, much better to have Robertson there than Tsimikas, I would say. So I don't see a huge amount of rotation, but from an attacking point of view, still much preferred Trent. The other option is to go for a Man City defender. I mean, to be fair, they got Fulham away, West Ham at home this week. There could be a clean sheet or 2 in there, but I don't know if I want to block off that third Man City spot just yet. You could use the argument they got a double this week, double in 37. Just get the move done now, get Diaz, and just keep him all the way through. But I think there could be some rotation in the not in the Champions League, but in the Premier League around the Champions League. And it's not just that my defender might get rotated; it's that another player might start that we find out about that I might want instead. So, for example, if I just come over to the FPL site, in Game Week 35, 4 fixtures are at 3 o'clock, and they are the first fixtures of the game week. So the deadline's 1:30. We might find out some of the players playing for Man City. So if Mahrez is starting or Alvarez is starting, I might want to take a punt on them. Now, I'm not someone that goes out of my way to take those kind of punts, but I also want to kind of leave the option open. I don't think I'm really going to want to sell any of those midfielders, but you never know. And with Alvarez, of course, I could just do Haaland to Alvarez then back again. But what if Haaland and Alvarez are starting? I might want to do Watkins to Alvarez or Isak to Alvarez or whoever it is instead, and not have to worry about the fact that I've got that defender in that slot instead. So I don't, as much as I think Diaz is a really good option from now until 37 or maybe until the end of the season, I'm not sure he's so much better than Robertson that I would make that move. But I want Trent. And the only way to do it is take a -8. And the only 2 players I can downgrade are Kepa and Watkins, because Trippier and Botman have got a good fixture this week, but they also double in 36. There's no point in transferring them out. With Kepa, I could go to Everson, but that doesn't really help me for the rest of the season. Whereas Watkins to Isak is a move that I wanted to make in Game Week 36 anyway. So I could just pull that forward to now and just take the extra hit so I get Trent. Now, the logic is kind of there, but I feel like when people say you were going to do it anyway, so just do it now, that's similar to kind of Martinelli to Odegaard for a hit, because it will definitely repay in the long run. Stuff could happen by the time we get to 36 where I don't need Isak. Maybe he's injured, or there's another player that's a better option that week. It's unlikely, I know. It's only a few game weeks away, but it could happen. So I think I'm going to end up doing it because I really want Trent. But I don't know if the logic is completely there. But ultimately, I want to go into Game Week 34 with a team that I originally intended, that I'm going to be very happy with on paper. And if that's Trent instead of Robertson for an additional 4 points, that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm not worried about the fact that Isak got benched last night. He got benched in 29, quick turnaround. Benched in 33, quick turnaround. Probably going to get benched in 36 as well. But I think given that I don't want to swap my goalkeepers, I don't want a third Newcastle defender, and I don't want any of their midfielders, it still makes sense to get Isak in. It might just be that I don't captain him. That's a decision for game week 36. So I think in the end, I'll do Watkins to Isak to enable me to get Trent. The only other thing to quickly talk about is captaincy. Now, don't get me wrong. Haaland, absolutely the best captain this week. I don't think he's going to get rotated for either of those games. Everything we've seen so far is that if he's fit, he starts in the Premier League. He might get brought off 45, 55, 65 minutes, but if he does, it means Man City are probably comfortable, in which case they've scored, in which case Haaland is probably involved. And if I'm looking at those fixtures, I think Haaland goes into this week with 12 points already on the board, and it's just how much more he's going to get above that. The only reason I'm thinking about going for Salah instead is because I'm pushing for that top 10k, and there's not many more weeks left to go different. And Salah's got 2 home fixtures. Yes, he blanked last week, but he's been quite consistent recently. Could he outscore Haaland? Possibly. A couple of things playing on my mind with that, though. One, I'd already be in the top 10k if I hadn't backed against Haaland to go for Salah so much. I'd probably have enough points where I'd be in the top 10k. And also, people did this same kind of discussion last week, right? Some people went for Salah against West Ham away instead of Haaland at home to Arsenal, and it massively backfired. So now they're even further behind wherever they were trying to get to, and now they're probably thinking about going different again. And that's kind of not a trap, but that's the thing that I don't want to kind of fall into, where I'm going different to push, but then if it goes wrong, I'm even further behind. Now, some people might say, who cares, right? You're like 42k anyway. If it goes majorly wrong, you might fall back to 80 or 90k. Is that the end of the world? Probably not. But when you create content, it is just easier to get the best rank possible, even if that means playing, at times, what people might call a little bit safer. The other thing is, if I think Haaland's going to get 12 points, how many more than that do I really think Salah's going to get? If he gets 22, is that realistic? Maybe. 10-point difference. But I think 12 is the minimum for Haaland. So I think Salah is a huge differential this week. Haaland's captaincy is going to be insane. Salah will be brought in quite heavily this week. His overall ownership will be high, but captaincy will be really low. So it's a huge differential. But even so, I just don't know if this is the route to go indifferent to push to that top 10k, because if Haaland smashes Salah again, which has happened like pretty much every single week for this whole season, then I'm going to just be further behind, and then it's probably not going to happen whatsoever. So I'm just thinking, in game week 35, if we get that Man City lineup, is there a differential there? In game week 36, where Isak might be benched, could we go Trippier? Could I go for a Brighton attacker, even though they've got Newcastle and Arsenal away, because I know that other people aren't going to captain them? Maybe they're the times to go different, but time is running out to push for those ranks that we want. So it's playing on my mind. I just know that deep down, it's not the right decision. And also, I just don't know if I can take the stress over 2 games, because it basically means not watching those Man City games. And I'm probably going to want to watch them. And I know Haaland's going to do really well. So I just wanted to talk about that, because I know some people are going to be in a similar boat. But overall, if we're talking about best captain, probably not going to get rotated at all. It's Haaland. Maybe the rotation happens around Real Madrid. But so far, everything we've seen, if he's fit, he starts. He's probably going to have to be my captain. So that's the team. Looks good. Probably going to be Trent instead of Robertson. Let me know if you've got any thoughts about those plans. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll catch you later for final thoughts.